We'll still have a steady trickle of attendees coming in, but I'll go ahead and kick us off. Thank you all for joining today. As you know, or as you may know, this call is part of a larger series that NASEO has been putting on. So this is the last call of 6 that we've been hosting on affordability and multifamily with the topic on behavior change and long-term engagement. So I will go ahead to the next slide here. So just to recap some of our previous call topics, we had one call on state energy office perspectives on multifamily affordability programs, identifying multifamily buildings in need of improvement, resident and owner engagement, benchmarking and project scoping, and funding and financing. And today, again, on behavior change and long-term engagement. So each of these calls have been recorded and are posted to the NASEO YouTube channel. Soon enough, we'll have a multifamily page on the NASEO webpage where all of the recording links will be posted as well. And with that too, just a light reminder that today's call will also be recorded. So please just keep that in mind as we go through our hour today. But I think that's all from our end with NASEO. So without further ado, I'll pass things off to Ben. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alana and NASEO for organizing this. Ben Brower, I'm the Energy Bureau Chief with the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. The Energy Bureau serves as our state energy office here in Montana. Our office really hasn't done much work on the multifamily front. And admittedly, I'm not terribly well versed in this topic, which I think is a great reason to sign up to moderate a webinar. Looking forward to learning about what you all are doing on this front. I'll say that while we're also about to get a more significant role in multifamily energy issues, middle of December, we're planning to launch a new revolving loan program named MERL. The Multifamily Energy Retrofit Loan Program is going to be capitalized with our formula grant through the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Program. The program we're standing up is only going to be capitalized with about $5.5 million. So we expect the funding will go pretty quickly. Certainly, affordable housing is a high priority topic of interest in Montana, as it is across the nation, and looking forward to learning from you all on your experience, in particular on this topic of behavior change and long-term engagement. So the panel is set to dive into this important and complex topic, really the question of how to engage residents to achieve long-term energy goals through behavior change in multifamily housing. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jen Schill, the Senior Sustainability Manager with the Institute for the Built Environment at Colorado State University, to get us kicked off. Jen, you ready to roll?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
You're good.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me join this today, NASEO, and thank you so much, Ben. So as Ben mentioned, I'm with the Institute for the Built Environment. We are based out of Colorado State University, and our role is working to create healthy, thriving places through place source design, community facilitation, and research. I myself lead a variety of community engagement, organizational sustainability, and education initiatives, including behavior change programs. Next slide. No matter how efficiently designed or operated a building is, occupants can override optimized settings, as I'm sure we all know. And behavior change can have as much or even more impact on energy savings as capital improvements. Next slide. Today, I've been asked to share best practices from a toolkit that the Institute for the Built Environment published a few years ago. These can apply really to any multifamily properties, including affordable properties. And the toolkit came out of a project we did with the city of Fort Collins that we augmented with additional research. In 2019, we worked with the city on a voluntary multifamily building energy challenge because benchmarking requirements were rolling out the next year and the city wanted to ease them into it. And they also wanted to really focus on tenant education as part of that. So IBE managed that program, including property manager outreach and an energy ambassador program. Next slide. Energy behavior programs can't be a success without the property or building managers, obviously. You can't even really reach the residents without their support. But from our experience, recruiting them to engage in these kind of programs can be challenging. They're really busy people. They often need to be convinced that there are benefits to engaging residents beyond just the capital improvements in terms of energy savings. And it needs to be easy for them to integrate into what they're already doing. So we took a step back and thought about recruitment messaging to ensure that we were speaking to their needs and barriers and motivators. And here you can see the messaging that was used for Fort Collins, where we really leaned into property publicity and leadership. Different property managers express varying receptivity and capacity. It's really dependent on where their headquarters are located, how much they're already doing currently to engage their community, how much they've adopted sustainability. And ultimately, with the city of Fort Collins, we ended up focusing on properties that had in-state property management companies or smaller companies because the others were largely unresponsive to our outreach. Addressing barriers to entry, it's really important to make it easy for property managers to participate. So really offering flexibility in regards to how much time they need to invest versus how much support they could get from you or partners. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about community-based social marketing here. The most effective resident engagement programs are designed through collaborating with the property managers to designing them to their specific community. And that's based on property staff resources, budget, property manager capacity, resident demographics, and values. This last part is where community-based social marketing comes in. CBSM, as we call it for short, is an evidence-based approach to behavior change that's grounded in social psychology and executed at the community scale. It involves truly understanding the audience. What are their values? What are their barriers and motivators to taking action? And then developing strategies, a campaign, messaging, and collateral that really speaks to them. So that messaging needs to account for different cultures, different languages spoken, literacy levels, utility fee structures that will drive different barriers or motivators, and messaging that offers personalized information about their building and the specific behavioral change that you're seeking to affect in the community. So this diagram here illustrates the process of CBSM, and you can see that everything on the right side there is really about understanding that audience. I want to call attention to that star there. A lot of times programs jump right to the strategies without first understanding the uniqueness of the audience, and as a result, there's reduced success. So this whole right side is really in collaboration with the property managers to really understand a given property and community. Next slide, please. Based on understanding of audience, some properties are well suited for an energy ambassador program, which can be really incredibly effective if they're designed and managed well. They do take time. Ambassador programs lean into shifting social norms through peers, educating and engaging their peers. In our experience, there are 3 keys that drive the greatest success of ambassador programs. The first is asking people to make a commitment in front of their peers. It increases their accountability and follow through. The second is modeling, which is what ambassadors do through setting an example themselves and initiating that shift in social norms in their community. And the third is monthly education, making sure that the residents have continual engagement to keep their interest up and to remind them to keep that behavioral change front of mind, because we all need reminders with change because change is hard. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, these programs require management and time, even if you're not directly managing the ambassadors. This starts with recruitment. You can see here, this is a piece of recruitment collateral that we had used for the city of Fort Collins to recruit ambassadors. the recruitment strategy needs to be matched again to the property. So this goes back to that CBSM as well. Are resident ambassadors an option? They're truly ideal to have someone who's living in that community talking to their peers. If not, external ambassadors can certainly work. They may have more interest and or time. We actually use both internal and external with the city. And recruitment strategy and messaging to recruit ambassadors will depend on who those ambassadors, who you want them to be, whether they're internal or external. Once they're on board, there's a need to invest in training. From my experience, ambassadors want really robust confidence in the topic of energy conservation. And so educating them more deeply than they may ever educate some of their peers may be desired by them, just to have them feeling confident. And at minimum, they need to be aware of any related government programs and incentives like rebates. Engaging ambassadors in designing the strategy that they will be employing can be really advantageous to gain greater buy-in. And if they are residents, they'll also bring that firsthand knowledge and insight into their community about what might work versus not. Once the program launches, the ambassadors continue to need ongoing support. They'll have questions. They'll need potentially more materials. And we've found that regular progress check-ins with all of the ambassadors together can be really valuable in sharing lessons learned, brainstorming solutions if someone's having some challenges, and just keeping everyone excited. And of course, we can't forget to recognize for the hard work of ambassadors. Next slide, please. Here, I wanted to share a side-by-side comparison of science-based strategies for successful community engagement versus those that were used for a community energy challenge block leader program in my community about 15 years ago. In that program, you can see here on the right side that participants actually signed up online on their own. They weren't recruited by peers. It wasn't done publicly in front of someone. There wasn't regular education to keep them engaged. There was just singular campaign messaging. It wasn't tailored to smaller communities and the unique needs of different communities and individuals. And there was no peer modeling. And as a result, the program was not as successful as hoped. Next slide. Now that I've shared some aspects of engagement programs, I wanted to share a sense of what goes into them in terms of the potential roles that state offices or others might play in supporting property managers, because at the end of the day, it really is about supporting those property managers to lead within their communities. This table illustrates that variable support. On the leftmost column, it's the essential and potential aspects that you might have in a behavior engagement program. I didn't talk much about energy challenges, but those are kind of obvious. It's residents within a property or even across properties competing for the greatest energy savings to win prizes or recognition. Everything else I think I primarily touched on. The middle column shows support that a very involved property manager might need versus the right side of a property manager who doesn't have as much capacity and time and needs a lot more support. And you'll see that the support needed for those property managers who are more deeply involved and resourced, that the role may be largely template driven, providing flexible templates that they can customize to their community, versus on the right, a lot more time consuming and hands-on, co-creating strategy and collateral, maybe managing events, potentially more. We ended up with the city of Fort Collins doing primarily, if not entirely, the right column, working hand in hand with property managers to help them design their specific strategy. We were there on site to provide event support. We trained the ambassadors, but it can really vary depending on, as well, on partners. So next slide here. to expand the capacity and make an engagement program as robust as possible, engaging partners definitely makes for the greatest success. Partners can each bring something different to deepen that programming. Just for example, the state could provide funding, a nonprofit, community-based organization could come in with people power to manage the program and really do all of that hands-on heavy lifting. And then maybe a utility donates resources such as advanced power strips. Next slide. So I'm going to round out with a case study. Energy Outreach Colorado here in my state is a nonprofit that serves the state of Colorado as a one-stop shop for energy services for affordable housing. EOC coordinates with the state energy office to help property managers access funding, technical assistance, and compliance support through a streamlined process. They also provide training and resources to property managers for behavior change programming. So while the Colorado Energy Office provides funding, EOC delivers the on-the-ground implementation and resident-focused engagement, with property managers being that bridge, applying upgrades and fostering the resident behavior change. EOC offers really flexible options. They really meet property managers where they are to help them identify the improvements, the physical improvements that are right for their building, and to guide implementation on a timeline that's best suited for the property and budget. And the resident behavior change programming fits in there accordingly, depending on the needs and abilities of the property manager. Since implementing its multifamily energy efficiency program, EOC has helped save hundreds of thousands of dollars in energy costs. And they attribute their success to three key components. The first is leveraging base funding to secure additional funding and partnerships, so really pulling those resources to expand capacity. Second is using a central database to track and support the reductions in energy use and utility bill savings. And you can see here how thoroughly they are doing tracking. And this is an important way to show success to motivate the property managers and the residents and the broader community, bring more people, partners, funding in. And finally, the third key to their success is continuous improvement through ongoing evaluation. They have some really great case studies that are on their website where you can see that they very thoroughly thought through, okay, what worked, what didn't, what lessons have we learned that we can apply as we move forward. So I encourage you to check out EOC's website, and I'm happy to put a link in the chat when I'm done here, which is now. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Lauren. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks, Jen. We're going to circle back to questions at the end for everyone. So do keep your questions in mind. And as Alana noted, feel free to drop them in the chat if you want to get us queued up for a question. So with that, off to you, Lauren Westmoreland, with Stewards for Affordable Housing for the Future. Please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Jennifer, for that presentation. A lot of what you shared, we echo in the work that we see. And if you guys are interested in another case study that kind of is in similar lines to what Jennifer shared, I'm just putting one in the chat for a property in Illinois. So I will talk a little bit about our work. I'm Lauren Westmoreland with SAFE. We use our acronym. That's what we go by. And we can go to the next slide. We work with 13 nonprofit affordable housing providers that have almost 2,100 properties across the country. We do work in several different areas, including the energy and sustainability work that I lead. We do a lot around financial innovation. And as well, we look a lot at resident voice, agency, and improving outcomes. So I'm pulling a lot of information both from the work that I do, but as well as the focus that there is around how do we make sure that residents are thriving in the homes that they live. And I think these can provide some good examples as we're thinking through how you all can support that long-term engagement. We can go to the next slide. So we know that there is a vested interest here on both sides. So if you are less likely to be able to pay your energy bill, you're less likely to be able to pay rent. This is something that we know is of a concern to everyone out there, and we don't want to increase those energy burdens. And there is that direct correlation. And if we can go to the next slide. And this is really problematic because we are seeing across the affordable housing sector in particular that there is an increase in unpaid rent as we've moved through the pandemic and as inflation and energy costs and everything have gone up. So this is taking a look at our portfolio. And as you can see, the number of folks who are in arrears is increasing. And therefore, we too know that they're also experiencing probably inability to pay their energy costs. So one of the things that we did as we were starting to think about that was how do we address this issue? How do we support housing stability? And also through that, reducing energy burdens. And the first thing, if we can go to the next slide, is really thinking about the roles in the property. So we have essentially two roles that probably should be thought of as we're thinking about affordable housing. Your traditional property management and resident services. Both are situated on site, either full-time or part-time, depending on the way the properties are structured. But they do very, very different things and they have very different goals. So when you're thinking about property management, they're involved in ensuring that that property is financially sound and operating smoothly. And in a lot of cases with residents, they may be seen more as enforcement, making sure you're not having your lease violations, those types of things. There's also resident services, and this is a growing field, and about 70% of our residents, safe member residents, have access to a resident services staff. This person is not in the involvement of collecting rent. They may serve as a mediator occasionally between like the resident and property management, but they're really there to focus on supporting resident outcomes. And through that, they're trying to find better ways to get residents what they need. Traditionally, this is focused a lot on things like how to access Social Security, how to make sure you're getting your Medicare or Medicaid services. If you're looking for, after school things for your children, like those types of services. But I think there's an ability to sort of expand their information and an ability to share, valuable things with residents, especially with regards to energy, sustainability, and other things. So we can go to the next slide. So where can we look to both property management in some cases and resident services in others? And the way we sort of see it is three different areas. So there's your regular communications. What can we do to make sure that like on a daily basis, residents have information and can access what they need to help them make smart energy choices? What happens when we have changes in the property? So as we're seeing more energy efficiency projects, electrification projects, how can we make sure that those have good outcomes? And lastly, when we are in crisis, when we have extreme weather events, we have power outages, how can we also make sure that residents have information as needed? The goal has always been build really good trust through those regular and daily communications so that when we get to situations where there is change or crises, that we have those good lines of communication going. So figuring out, I think, first, where we can fit in those communications around regular and daily is really important. And then let's talk through a couple of examples. So we can go to the next slide. And we'll just move right to the next slide. So one of the first things that I think is an opportunity is that our members have been looking more closely at how we make sure that residents are stable in their housing. And part of that is making sure that their leases are updated on a regular basis and they have the good information that they need to make sure that is happening. I see that there's also an opportunity at this point to make sure that there is information directly given to them about energy assistance. Here's the information to sign up for LIHEAP or whatever the program is called in your state. what are different utility payment plans, etc. I also put a little image up here. This is from Georgia, where senior citizens can get a discount if you're on if you're get your electricity through Georgia Power. Our owners are out there sort of looking for these things across different states. And if there's information that's really available around this that can be handed to them so that they can distribute it, when they're either leasing up the property or doing these reader certification points so that residents have the ability to make smart choices like at the time. It's really important, and it's something that I think typically falls by the wayside. If we can move to the next slide. Another thing that's important is setting up to have these discussions around increasing energy bills, resilience, and those types of things when we're not at that crisis scenario. So this is one of our members, National Housing Trust. They received a fund from the DC DOEE to do some general education, awareness, and outreach around different things, including electrification, energy, and resilience strategies. And it was an opportunity to ask residents about their concerns and priorities and also talk about what electrification projects looked like and what this might look like if they came in and did work in the property. One thing that was really interesting about this is that residents are pretty well educated on what's happening, especially around extreme temperatures and other sorts of issues that they're seeing come up. So it becomes much less of a difficult conversation, especially at this point of where we're not in a crisis of saying, yes, you too are seeing things get hotter. We're looking at how we can get funding for heat pumps to make sure that you guys can have high quality, really comfortable spaces that include air conditioning. We can go to the next slide. This is an example that I recently shared with several affordable housers in Maryland. They're looking at complying with building energy performance standards that are coming across the state. And they're thinking too, how can we do resident engagement? And what we've always encouraged is start small. So here's some examples of where we suggested to them, looking at the things that came out of our housing stability cohort, how you phrase things, how you talk about energy efficiency, how you can share some tips and that type of stuff. But one thing that I think that's really important that we've also seen is as these new programs are coming out, as we're trying to get the communication down to residents, is also recognizing what we've told them in the past about scams. So as in particular, where you do have some choice around your energy provider, we do know that scams have popped up. And if information is coming from sources that they're unfamiliar with, they may be really hesitant to actually pursue these programs. So thinking too about how there's partnership, with resident services, CBOs, and other trusted networks, individuals coming in, whether it's through like an energy implementer program or something else, like might make them wary from participating and really seeing that ability to participate in a program. And if we can go to the next slide. And funny enough, in particular, we actually had a conversation during that resident engagement session where an affordable houser was saying, I was trying to sign people up for community solar and no one wanted to come and talk with us about it because they thought it was a scam. So too, thinking about how when you're establishing community solar programs or other things that are new, like who are you partnering with? And how are you working together? We did a cohort with affordable housers around community solar. And we found that it really needs to be focused on not just individual properties, but really around the residents and making sure you're addressing a lot of barriers up front, including wariness, language barriers, any sort of questions around like income, that type of stuff before we start to ask them to participate in things. So making sure that if there's the ability to do categorical eligibility, if you live in a LIHTC building, like you income qualify, those types of things. We can go to the next slide. So that was a little bit about like what is happening on sort of a daily basis. Any of that communication can be handed out, as we're just going through the daily process of managing a property. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happens when we're thinking about changes. So, this is a property in California, and they upgraded heat pump water heaters. And there was not enough outreach done at the beginning to make residents aware of what was happening. And in this case, after installing the heat pump water heaters, they got a lot of complaints from the residents, often to the point of where the residents were like, I just want that gas water heater back. Like, I had no problems before, and now you guys have created problems. So if we can go to the next slide. This provides an example of doing it a little bit different of a way and how to get sort of that long-term acceptance of new equipment out there. So in this case, this is another California property. It happened about a year or so ago where they replaced the heat pump hot water or the gas water heaters with heat pump hot water heaters. And one of the things that they did to begin with is they did a 1 unit mock-up. And as you're thinking about your programs and you're thinking about change, like testing it out first before making someone doing it across the entire property is really important. They were able to work out the kinks in order to make sure that residents would not be impacted. The other thing that we often see is really important with residents being okay with what's happening is that you get in and out really quickly. So the other thing with doing this mock-up is they were then able to only impact residents across one day, not multiple days, just one day. And that was really important to make sure that residents felt comfortable with what was happening on the property. And the last thing that's really interesting with this case study is they also switched out the heating and cooling as well, and they kept the thermostat because in order to make sure that residents were comfortable with this new equipment change, like it wasn't necessary to change that interface of what they were looking at. So they could feel comfortable to come back in and continue sort of setting their temperatures where they're at and sort of not hitting some situations of where they didn't know what was going on. So we can go to the next slide. And then lastly, setting affordable housers up to be able to do some surveying before and after. So community housing partners, they did a bunch of surveying before to make sure that the upgrades that they were looking to do would make an impact in the residents' daily lives. And then therefore, they'd be more likely to use them in the right way. And then educating them and giving them information on the equipment that was changed afterwards. And then we'll go to basically my last slide. I can go to the last one. So crises. So the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is impacts from extreme weather. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure as we're thinking about extreme weather is not only how you construct a property or how you rehab a property and what happens during, extreme situations around property operations, but how are we dealing with resident engagement? So when we have, a heat wave, how are we making sure that we're thinking about this not just from like operations of like what's going to happen with the bills and are the heating and cooling systems running, but going as far in resident engagement to thinking about like how are residents getting places? Do they have to walk outside for public transportation? That type of thing. So we are really talking with our affordable housers amongst all of this, and especially for those of you who do have some sort of emergency capacity within your state energy office. Like this is something too, as you're thinking about engagement, not just the daily communication or during the change, but also how are we making sure that during these crises, that multifamily properties in particular, where we're serving seniors are thought about and engaged with to make sure that they stay safe and healthy. And I will stop there and hand it off to Samantha.
Thanks, Lauren. So Samantha Caputo with Oracle Utilities. Samantha is the Regulatory Affairs and Market Development Manager for Oracle. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Caputo. I'm with Oracle and the Regulatory Affairs team, as Ben mentioned. And I'm just going to share my slides. This in presentation mode. All right. And you're seeing the full screen slide, right? Not the notes slide.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Okay, so just going to dive right in. As a part of Oracle Utilities, we have the OPower customer engagement platform. And this is really a platform focused on driving behavior change at scale. So we do a lot of work with utilities. So for state energy offices, it's really about thinking of how you can leverage the utilities within your states and working with them through either energy efficiency programs, through integrated resource planning, and other regulatory processes to really leverage behavioral energy efficiency programs to scale that across residential households. And so the platform that Oracle has is really focused on proactive outreach and engagement across a robust suite of solutions. And this has helped to drive over $4 billion of energy bill savings over the past 15 plus years. At the same time, looking at reducing energy demand, increasing enrollment in the different types of programs available, and really helping to drive household satisfaction with utilities and making sure they're aware of the different programs that are available to them. One of the key things I think when thinking about how to really enhance behavioral change, drive energy savings, is leveraging what we use in an opt-out program design. So for behavioral energy efficiency programs, this is ensuring that anyone eligible is able to participate. So whether you're in a single family home or multifamily building, whether you're a renter or an owner, geographical location, all those things, there's no barrier to participation. And the opt-out design helps ensure that you're scaling the accessibility of these programs, which then in turn drives the type of outcomes we've seen over the lifetime of our programs. And so, thinking about the types of digital and technology solutions that can be leveraged in addition to a lot of the other approaches that my co-panelists have discussed today, technology solutions can help fill the gap of reaching people that may not go to an in-person event or know about the resources that are available to them by proactively engaging them. And so I've kind of broken this down between the types of engagement and solutions. And so one of the, I think, core foundational solutions that we leverage for behavior change is monthly engagement through home energy reports. And so this is that once a month email or paper report that a household gets that's comparing them to similar homes. And this is really, leveraging those behavioral principles that encourage households to take action and figure out how do they compare to households that are similar to them or the efficient households in their areas. And then weekly engagement is something that we've rolled out in addition to monthly that helps provide that additional coaching to households. And this can be very dynamic based on the types of programs available, whether or not you have EV time of use rates or just trying to drive EV enrollments or doing more EV coaching on a weekly basis. And then in addition to that, which are kind of like that scheduled type of behavioral engagement, we also look at proactive engagement as well, which are triggered by either high bills or trending towards a high bill, any like energy assistance programs becoming available. So thinking about like LIHEAP enrollment opening up, so sending an alert about that. Or if the focus is on like peak demand reduction, doing more behavioral demand response. And then all of these proactive and outbound type communications, part of what we do with a lot of utilities we work with is then driving those households to then go to the web as well, right? So getting any like web digital self-service tools available to them to really kind of like look at their home energy analysis or understand the programs that might help them better manage their energy use within their homes. And so that's the where we try to drive people from these different outbound communications that we send. And I wanted to just highlight specifically some of the alerts, those proactive alerts that we leverage, because I think that this really helps, especially when thinking about energy affordability and driving program awareness, is leveraging alerts as a way to really meet households where they are and at moments that matter the most. And so there are a lot of different types of alerts that can be leveraged here. So whether you're focusing on affordability, so this could be, trying to provide insights and information on programs that are available to help with managing energy bills. The similar is the high bill alert, which is in the middle there, which is really as households are going throughout their month. If they're trending towards a higher bill, we want to provide insights into that ahead of time to help reduce bill shock and give tips and guidance on what they can do to try and mitigate the impact of that high bill. And then another similar type of communication is really focused on the demand side. So those event-based communications of trying to reduce peak on the hottest days in the summer, or starting to even see utilities leveraging this for winter peaks as well. And so all of these different types of outbound communications that are really working to drive behavior change at scale. What does it look like when they're brought together? And I think this is one of the really cool things about the digital solutions and helping engage households over the long term is that layering these different types of outbound communications together can really provide a dynamic experience for households, and you can follow them along through their journey as they start to take action or engage in programs. Like, what is the next best thing for them to do? And so when we think about this from energy savings, the foundation, again, being that paper home energy report. And this is really the main driver for energy savings and behavioral energy efficiency. So we're looking at like 1 to 2% of energy savings by sending paper home energy reports to households. Email has become an incredibly important component to these types of programs because it provides that enhanced digital engagement, and we're trying to get households to interact more with their utilities, right? And giving more information to utilities about how they're using energy in their home. And it's a lot easier to gather that insight from households if they're looking at an email and doing like a one-click kind of survey response and things like that. So this provides an additional piece of layered energy savings that we can capture at the household level. And then kind of going in from there is that high usage or high bill alert that I reference. And this is really one of the most, I would say, like one of the favorite types of communications that customers receive through the utilities that we work with, because it really helps to, connect the dots between how you're using energy in your home, and then where you're projecting to see your energy bill go. And at a time when everyone is experiencing affordability pressures and seeing higher bills than they're used to with energy costs rising, this is a really important tool that all households should have access to, regardless of, if it's single family or multifamily. But this can help provide additional energy savings at the household level because you're getting that financial indicator around where your bill is projected. And then typically these will then include tips of like if you're trending towards a higher gas bill in the winter, what are some tips around managing your heating usage or your hot water in your home? Or the same thing, if you're, seeing a lot of cooling in the summer, what are some tips around that to help mitigate the impact of that? And then the other piece is bringing in that coaching, that weekly coaching piece of this is how your usage is trending week over week, and then becomes even more dynamic when we have confirmation of if they're an EV owner or if they have solar in their home. So like or community-based solar, those types of data points can be integrated into these communications. And so I wanted to kind of show a little bit of an example of how this has worked with a couple of utilities that we have focused on the affordability aspect of this. So leveraging, I think, utility data, it provides a lot of insight, right, into identifying and engaging households on a personalized manner. So leveraging that data to identify households that we think have a higher energy burden, and whether, again, having insight into the dwelling type associated with that household. And then sometimes we're able to also confirm renter versus owner in these situations. So identifying the households with the highest energy burden, and then trying to reach them, again, leveraging that proactive outbound communication. And so in these instances, it's really focused on using that affordability alert. So providing assistance on bills, and identifying the programs that are available either through the utility or also state and federal programs that they can leverage to help bring their energy costs down. And then in these instances, similar to trying to drive households to the web to engage further, we had put together a kind of like one-stop shop in these scenarios to show all the different types of programs available, and the ones that they would benefit most from based on the information that we had about that household. So whether or not that was like a discount rate, being able to take advantage of LIHEAP, or if there's an energy efficiency program that was the best next action for them. So really bringing that personalized insight to the household. And one example, we did this with National Grid in Massachusetts, and we had huge success in being able to identify the right households in Massachusetts that had higher energy burden, that were able to really take advantage of the programs that were highlighted in the one-stop shop. In this instance, we saw significant increased enrollment in LIHEAP over one winter, increased enrollment in the discount rate, and then also taking advantage of any like arrearage management programs to help pay down any unpaid utility bills. And then AEP was another utility that we've been working with on this across all of their operating companies, so across a lot of different states here. But over the course of our work with them, we've reached over 1 million different low to moderate income households, and have really focused in on making AEP a trusted source of information and guidance for households of the programs that they can take advantage of. So trying to enhance and improve the relationship that utility customers have with their utility, looking to them as a source of insight and information to help them with their bills instead of not knowing what's available to them. And so we did see a lot after looking and engaging with the households that have participated in this from AEP. We saw a significant boost in awareness and agreement that the utility is there to help them. And this is really just one example of how a digital solution can really enhance behavior change and be used to drive long-term engagement by continuing to provide these programs and engage with households again and again. And I believe that is the end for mine. Yes. Okay. So I will pass it back to Ben.
Thank you, Samantha. Interesting presentation there. So again, for folks who are listening in, feel free to drop questions into the chat, and we'll get to those. I've got a couple of questions in mind just to get us started. And maybe if we could jump back to Jen and in your best practices for program design. I'll say, just to kick this off, that in a previous life before I worked at the State Energy Office, I organized something through a nonprofit group called Neighborhood Conservation Clubs, and it was part book club and part support group, and it was meant to provide mostly single family homeowners with a strategy to do energy conservation projects. And the kickoff was great. There was tons of enthusiasm. A lot of people showed up, a lot of people signed up, but boy, it just crashed and burned real hard. And it was a year in, and it was done. And so I'm curious in particular about the question of longevity and how the programs that you have seen have really succeeded in sticking it out for the long haul, and what those elements of the best practices are that really contribute to the longevity of a program in multifamily facilities.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that comes back to the community-based social marketing model and some of the key principles there, one of which I didn't share, so I'll go into a little more detail. Ideally, and to have the most effective programs, you focus on what is called an indivisible behavior. So to step into a program and say, hey, everybody, we're going to work on saving energy, and here are 12 ways that you can do this. That can both be overwhelming, and then it doesn't have that peer coalescence and social norm movement around something more specific. And so in an ideal scenario, and to have the most effective outcomes, you focus on an indivisible activity. So that might be take a slightly cooler shower, for example, very specific, right? Get a smart advanced power strip and put that in your home. And so that also speaks to I talked about the time, the commitment, the ambassador piece. There definitely has to be someone who's continually championing the ambassadors so that they have that continued support. And there's constant continual engagement. There's regular education. There's keeping that thought of that behavior shift, because it's hard to change behaviors. We all know that. Front of mind for people. So those continual reminders through different communications, through emails, through physical signs in the building, but also through that person-to-person contact. I think the other thing that I just want to call out that's really tricky, especially with not just with multifamily, but if you think about something like a heat pump or a solar panel, that is something that with single family homes, you can see it physically outside. There's this physical display that starts to accelerate that social norm. And a lot of these behaviors that are taking place are inside of people's homes. And so their neighbors don't necessarily see them doing it. And so that ups the game and the need to continue to have those conversations, to have also these public pledges where people are committing publicly and then holding them accountable through that ongoing communication and engagement.
Great, thank you. One more quick question. In the ambassador structure that you referenced, are you seeing compensation being an important part of the program design? I'm sorry if I missed that element of your presentation.
No. So that is another great question. So we actually recently worked with Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency. They were doing this, what's called a Promotoris program around climate education. If anyone's not familiar with Promotoris, it came out of the health advocacy field, and it involved going door to door, people talking to their peers. So very similar to this ambassador model. The most effective approach to the Promotoris model has been that they are paid, that they are compensated for their time. So I would say if funding is available, 100%, and it will absolutely increase the success. And otherwise, you need to think about incentives. And that, again, goes back to thinking about that audience of now the ambassadors. What what's important to them, what would motivate them. Do they want public recognition? Are they just really interested in building community and neighborhood ties? And so if the money is needed in a given community, then it would be essential. Lauren, I see you nodding your head. I would love to see what additional thoughts you might have because I know a lot of our work overlaps.
Yeah, no, I think we agree. I think there is if you're asking someone to do something that you normally pay someone else to do, like, you need to pay them. And we have seen that that does encourage more participation in general. So, it doesn't have to be significant. We went out to interview residents and we gave them a $50 gift card for their time. And we also gave them the benefit of knowing that we wouldn't share anything negative they had to say about the property with the property owner, which also I think is important around sort of protecting residents as well. Um, I think it's not as relevant in this case, but it is something to just consider of like, if there are things that arise that are not great, like, and the ambassadors are seeing it, how are we ensuring um, their safety in all of this?
Lauren, some of the strategies you shared about easing the adoption of new energy technologies, it seemed like there's a lot of value there. And, for example, making sure that you've got a heat pump water heater set up and design that is going to be welcome and accepted, and that, you're going to get the replacement done in a day and, get out of people's hair. You say a little bit more about that sort of interface between the technology implementation and I think building champions for energy efficiency in the work that that implementers are doing. Are there more strategies that you've been investigating along those lines or trying to see implemented along those lines that again get the technology out there, but also build advocates and champions for that technology at the same time?
Yeah, so I think that some of it we can expect residents or maybe even property managers to be the advocates on these things. Like when we're talking about switching out um, water heating equipment, like that's just stuff like no one's going to get super excited on. But we recently had a property in California where they switched out old electric resistance heating that was in the ceiling with new heat pumps. And then the residents, like, even though their bills sort of stayed the same on an annual basis, they got air conditioning. And so their heating costs were lower. And they did have more costs on the summer side, but they got the cooling. And so they were willing to sort of go through the process of figuring out how this all worked in their apartment because they were getting something that was truly a benefit to them. So I think too, as we think about these things, what are the real benefits that the residents are going to be experiencing? And how do we make sure that they understand those benefits and like what that actually looks like? In the case of better hot water heating, like, not only does it have to save them money, it also needs to function well. And I think that's the challenge around some of the new technology, is we're
You
still
bet.
figuring things out.
Great. I realize we're just about up on time, but Samantha, if you've got a second, one question for you. I am curious about the human interface of the products and platforms that you're offering to utilities and that you're implementing, and whether you've seen a complementary approach to perhaps the ambassador program that Jen was describing, where there's a very data driven data feedback and communication structure. Have you seen that implemented in combination with more of a on the ground ambassador type program, and any success along those lines?
Yeah, I think one example I can give of that, because I think that digital solutions are meant to be a helpful complementary to those ambassador type programs and the on the ground efforts that communities are making. The intention is not to replace those, but to supplement and help scale the access and awareness of programs, and make them aware also if there are like ambassador type services available. Some people like digital self-service. Some people like to go in person to get assistance and understand how to go through these processes. So I think it is really helpful to have them complement each other. I think one example is with the National Grid case study that I shared of really driving that affordability journey for households and increasing discount rate enrollment and LIHEAP payments is that Massachusetts does do data matching. So the CAP agencies that are helping with enrollment and guiding households through that process, they do have data matching with some of the state health agencies that enable auto enrollment in the discount rate and then helping with the LIHEAP process. But of course, that's not capturing everyone. And there are gaps in data matching where you have to have the same person that's on the utility bill be the person that's got the state health program that's got to be the same name and things like that. And so we saw a lot of success in helping enhance and increase enrollment by capturing and reaching people that the CAP agencies haven't been able to. And so I think it can be a really helpful tool to be used alongside. And one thing that we're thinking about and kind of like, strategizing on now too is how can we make those digital solutions and that backend available to a service like a CAP agency and others? Because it is something like on the utility side, customer service reps can kind of shadow a utility customer to understand like what's happening with their bill and getting those insights when a utility customer calls. So how can we make something like that accessible and available also to other agencies that are trying to help with these types of programs and guiding households through them. So I think that could be like a really cool future state to be at. We're not quite there yet with it.
Great. Well, thank you, Samantha. And thank you, Lauren and Jen as well. Appreciate the work that you're all doing and for your presentations and the discussion today. Alana, back to you to close us out.
Awesome. Yeah, just to echo Ben's thanks. Thank you all for being here today. I think this past hour has been highly informative and extremely helpful for the states and other partners that are looking to engage with residents and owners on these long-term energy savings goals and projects. And I just want to note, I know we're a little bit over, but just because this is the end of the series, it doesn't mean that the conversation needs to end here. For any of you who are interested in future discussions or looking for support on your work in the multifamily space, please feel free to reach out to me or my colleague, Maddie Kohler, and we'll be more than happy to help you however we can. Thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, Alana.
Bye.
Thank you.